Hi guys, hope you are well. So the big news of the day, as the title of the video reads, is we are suing the Federal Reserve. You heard correctly. I'm not joking. We're suing the Fed. I'm going to sue the Fed along with my good buddy, Robert Barnes, who is the constitutional free speech lawyer. Most of you know he represented the Covington kids. And if you're not familiar with that case, those were the Catholic kids that were wearing the red MAGA hats at the Washington Monument, or the Lincoln Monument, or something like that. You guys remember the story. He represented them. He's represented a lot of famous people. And Robert's a good friend. He really knows his stuff. And about, oh boy, maybe 6 months ago or so, I had the idea, and we had dinner in Las Vegas. And we sat there and talked for about 4 hours. And I said, Robert, I know it's a crazy idea, but could we sue the Federal Reserve? Because he and I always talk about how the United States has become a country of men and not of law. And what we saw from the Fed back in March and April of 2020 was grotesque, as far as the complete abandonment of the Federal Reserve Act, which should constrain the Fed. The central planners, whether it's the politicians, the central bankers, etc., they need to understand that they are not above the law. And if they believe they are above the law, then there's nothing that is protecting us. Nothing at all. And so, in my opinion, it's time that we stand up for what's right, and we stand up for the law, and we send a message. Now, whether we win the case or not, who knows? Obviously, we probably won't. But we send a message to the central planners and letting them know that enough is enough. And we are not going to allow them to continue to destroy the idea that America was founded on, to destroy free market capitalism, and to destroy what's left of our economy and society. And so the way this is going to work is it's going to cost, it's in 2 stages. And we've set up a website, or I think it's a page on my website, and it'll go live tomorrow or the next day. And it's about a 5-minute clip of Robert and I discussing, and Robert actually going over the technical legal jargon as to how he's going to approach this. And he's going to sue them initially under the FOIA Act. I believe it's a Freedom of Information Act. And he's going to take this in 2 stages. So the first stage is to get them to divulge information. And it's obviously we're building on what Ron Paul has done in the past so wonderfully. But we're going to try to dig deeper. And we're going to go back further, and then we're going to try to get information as to exactly what happened. I mean, we know at surface level what they did back in March and April of 2020 was completely against the Federal Reserve Act. And everyone just completely ignored it. The financial media, no one cared. No one said, oh, wait a minute, is that even legal, what they're doing? There are a few people on YouTube and podcasts and whatnot that mentioned that and said, hey, listen, this is a really big deal. But no one in the mainstream media did. So we need to go back and try to understand exactly what happened. And then from that stage 1, once we sue them through this FOIA, then we can gather the information and determine how we can take the next step, which is kind of the stage 2 of the process, and see what we have that's actionable from a standpoint of a lawsuit. So it's going to cost about, I don't know, 100 grand. I mean, when lawyers tell you it's going to cost 100 grand, it's always going to cost 125. So what we're doing is I'm putting up the first 25,000 myself out of my own pocket, just to get the ball rolling, so Robert can start the process. And then we're going to set up a GoFundMe account, and for every dollar that's put into the GoFundMe account, I'll match it 1 for 1 out of my own pocket. So to get up to 100,000, we start with 25 out of my pocket, so that's another 75. So call it 80. That's going to be 40,000. I'll have another 40,000 that I match it with. So at the end of the day, I'll probably have, I don't know, 60, 70,000 of my own money that will go towards this. But what better cause, in my opinion? So that's kind of the big news of the day. And let me go through why I think this is so important, other than the fact that they have just blatantly broke the law. And we need to send a message to all the central planners that they are not above, they're not above the law, and that there are things that constrain what they can do, and that we understand that these constraints are there to protect us from them, and that we are going to push back. We're not going to just turn and look the other way just because they tell us that what they're doing is beneficial. We're just not going to take it anymore. So that's obviously why the main reason we're doing this. But let's go into the nitty gritty. So I'm going to screen share, and I'm sure this is a chart that all of you have seen, but I really want to analyze it a little further. So this is the purchasing power of $1, going back to when the Federal Reserve was set up in 1913. So you can see we start off the dollar being worth $1, or having $1, being able to buy $1 worth of stuff. And then where we are today, we're at what, maybe 3 cents. So today's dollar can buy what 2 or 3 cents could have bought you in 1913 when the Fed was established. So why is that important? Because wages almost always lag slightly behind the rate of consumer price inflation. Now, they do go up over time, that is true, but there's usually a slight lag. And your savings is definitely going to lag behind inflation, especially when the Federal Reserve themselves are artificially lowering interest rates and trying to create negative real rates, meaning the nominal interest rate is below the rate of inflation. That's when savers lose purchasing power. So if savers let's think through the incentives that the Fed has set up just at surface level here. What it does is it takes people from being prudent and saving money for the future, and it turns them into gamblers at a casino. to where they have to go into the stock market. They have to have a 401k that's constantly invested. They have to dollar cost average into a stock market that's at all-time highs and in a massive bubble. They have to invest in a bond market that's in one of the largest bubbles in human history. They have to speculate even in Bitcoin. They have to speculate in gold. They don't have a choice. They have to lever up and speculate in the real estate market. If they don't, and they might not consciously think this through, but subconsciously, they know that they will never, ever get ahead if they just produce more than they consume and save the rest. Why? Because the Fed isn't allowing them to do so. It's pushing them further and further out the risk curve. Additionally, it's destroying the poor and middle class. Not just the Fed, I'm not saying they're doing this intentionally, but inflation itself. And I don't care whether it's 2%, because, oh, it's just 2%. People who say, oh, it's just 2%, don't understand compounding effects. Because 2% compounded over 20, 30, 40 years, the amount of time in which you are most likely going to be working is a big, big number. And the Fed is outwardly telling us that they want to decrease your purchasing power every single year by a minimum of 2%. They're basically telling you that, hey, we don't want you to save money. We want you to do the opposite of that. We want you to be imprudent. We want you to go out there and speculate. We want you to gamble. We want you to consume more than you produce. We want you to take on debt. This is the type of behavior that they are incentivizing. So it's obvious why that is detrimental to the poor and middle class, but it gets far, far, far worse. And most people are never even cognizant of this. Let's go back to when we had, let's call it deflationary money. The Bitcoiners always like to talk about this, and rightfully so. Going back to the 1800s, from the year 1800 to the year 1900, the consumer goods, the price of consumer goods went down by 50%. Meaning the value of dollars, the value of savings went up over 100 years. I mean, it's staggering to think about that in what we're living through today. Now, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, that would be a disaster because we can't have deflation. Oh, the economy would come collapsing in on itself. And they're right, it would. But because we've built an economy on debt. If we built an economy on productivity, then deflation, which is natural in a free market, would benefit not just the rich, but even more so the poor and middle class. Let's go through some numbers. If you look at the late 1800s, and I've done the math on this for a few videos, so I'll try to go through it right off the top of my head. We had about 2 to 3% deflation per year. Okay, the prices of goods and services got 2 to 3% cheaper. While at the same time, nominal wages increased. I believe it was maybe by 1% or so. Nominal wages, not adjusted for inflation. And that was per capita. While at the same time, nominal GDP went up. All right. So let's think this through. You're a McDonald's worker. You're making, and let's just use today's dollars so we can, it's easier to think through. You're making $1,500 a month. And let's say at the end of the month, you have nothing left. Your expenses are $1,500. Okay. Well, after, I can't remember the exact number I used in my video where I did the math, but it was roughly 20 years. Let's say you're working at McDonald's, the same job. You haven't gotten a raise. You haven't, well, you've gotten the raises, we'll say at the rate that everyone's wages were going up. So let's say 1% per year, right? But you're still doing the exact same job. You have no more responsibility. You're not a manager. You're not a regional manager. You've still got the exact same gig 20 years later, working the same hours. Okay. 20 years later, you'd be making about $1,800 per month. And you say, well, George, that's not a big deal. That's only about a $300 difference. Right. But what happened to your expenses? That's the key. Your expenses go down to about $800. See, so your expenses go down, I call it 800. Your income goes up by 200 or 300. So now, instead of at a break even, you're putting $1,000 a month in your back pocket. And oh, by the way, the $1,000 in 20 years that you're putting in your back pocket every month can buy more goods and services than it did 20 years prior at the beginning. And if you would have taken your savings, put it in the bank, you'd be making about a 7% real rate of return annually. Why would you need to go into the stock market? Why would you need to go into the latest SPAC? Why would you need to go so far out the risk curve when you could just make 7% by simply putting your money in the bank? Think about how that would change the mentality of our society. Think about how that would change the incentive structure. And then think what that would do over time to the purchasing power of the poor and middle class. That's what we had when the Fed was not in the equation. You see why I'm always so hard on the Fed? And a lot of people like to talk about the wealth gap and this and that, but they miss the forest for the trees. You're talking about a symptom. Let's go to the root cause. The root cause is the Fed. And let's not even talk about wars. Could we go, and I understand that all these other countries have central banks, so we'd be at a huge disadvantage. But outside of that, let's just think through central banks. What do central banks do? They facilitate war. A country couldn't go to war unless they had a central bank. The only way they could is if they taxed the people to pay for the war. And how many wars would we be involved with if every time the United States went into another war, they had to increase the taxes on the middle class? We'd be in a hell of a lot fewer wars. I'll tell you that. So let's just set that aside for a moment. That's the first thing. Inflationary money, destroying the poor and middle class by taking away their purchasing power over time and forcing them into a life of basically playing a slot machine. They're playing financial Jenga. And at some point in time, the game of musical chairs stops, the whole thing crashes down, and who loses? Klaus and Bigglesworth and Yellen and Powell and Bernanke? Absolutely not. They come out smelling like roses. The people who end up losing are the poor and middle class. Okay, so I've made my point there. Number two, the second thing the Fed does to destroy our economy. And I would argue destroy society. Now, again, I'm not saying they're doing this intentionally. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. That's not what this is about. This is about putting up constraints on the central planners. So the second thing they do is they create a boom bust cycle. So they force everyone into speculative assets. And then they intentionally now, through artificially low interest rates and quantitative easing, they intentionally try to blow up asset bubbles. And then the average Joe and Jane are always the last ones to the party. Just like in 2008, or it's 2007 with the housing bubble. Same thing with .com. And what ends up happening? As soon as the average person piles in because of FOMO and greed, there are no more buyers, and the tulip mania is done. Comes crashing down, the whole house of cards. And who is there holding the bag? The average Joe and Jane. And the Fed exacerbates this problem. They may think that they're trying to smooth out the business cycle. They're not. The only thing they're doing is kicking the can down the road and creating a much bigger bust when it inevitably comes. That's the second thing. Now, so then the third thing that they do is completely distort the economy. They distort the economy and they create a misallocation of resources and an inconceivable amount of malinvestment. They through their policies, they completely hollow out the middle class, like we said, and the poor, and the manufacturing base of the United States, or central bank of any country that pursues these types of policies. So that takes away all of let's call them good jobs, not just the good jobs, but it takes away our ability to create goods and services. And you guys know from watching my videos, how do you measure the wealth of the society? It's simply by the amount of goods and services it can produce efficiently. It's not the amount of currency units that we can create. If that was true, then Venezuela would be would be the richest country on the planet Earth. So what it does is it builds an economy that is addicted to monetary heroin. Just like heroin guy that I use in my whiteboard videos. And what happens is the drug addict needs more and more and more of the drug to have the same effect. The problem is the more of the monetary heroin the economy gets, just like the human heroin addict, the closer they get to their death. This is what the Federal Reserve is doing. And to exacerbate the unintended consequences of what they've done, now they are blatantly breaking the law in order to devalue the currency, in order to create a bigger boom and bust cycle, in order to turn our economy into a bigger monetary heroin addict, in order to hollow out our manufacturing base and in order to destroy the middle class and the working poor. And like I said at the beginning of the video, it's time for this to stop. Everyone that we listen to on YouTube, and that I'm just as big of a fan of as you are, they always talk about how the Fed is bad, the Fed is this, the Fed is this, and I do the exact same thing. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I wear a hat that says hashtag end the Fed, right? But we can sit here and bitch and moan about it all day long. But I truly believe as rebel capitalists, if you want to use that brand or whatever, we're not about just sitting on the couch and bitching about how bad the world is around us. We are about standing up and taking action, taking control over our destiny. And that's what this is all about. We need to take control so that the future, so that our families have a bright future, and that the central planners stop taking us down this path. It may be a path that's paved with good intentions, but you guys know exactly where the path paved with good intentions goes. So I just wanted to let you guys know kind of what we're doing. We're getting close to executing on this game plan, and I'll keep you posted. Obviously, we should have the page up on my website within the next couple days. The GoFundMe campaign, I've got Sebastian working on it, so that should be set up in the next couple days. And like I said, I'll fund it with the first $25,000 so that we can get Robert working on it. And let's see what we can do, and see what we can do as a community. I'm very optimistic, and at the very least, we can send a message that we're just not going to stand for this anymore. All right, so do you guys have any questions on the strategy or what we're doing, why we're doing this? Just let me know, and I'll stay on for a few minutes longer than I normally would, because I know this is an extremely important topic. I appreciate all the support, guys. Yeah, it's great. It's just something. It's a good cause, and if I'm gonna put in, whatever it is, 60, 70 grand or something like that, what better way to invest money? I mean, I can definitely consider this a fantastic investment. That's for sure. Yeah, as far as donating, I appreciate it, guys. I'll let you know when the GoFundMe is set up. And then and what's really cool too is a lot of the people that I've spoken with off the record, or when we're not recording, when I'm doing the Rebel Capital show, and I won't mention any names, but all of them have been extremely supportive. And they'd be like, yeah, I'll write the first check, that's for sure. But you don't have to donate. That's not what this is about. I'm not here to guilt you into donating or anything like that. Just follow and support the campaign however you want to. Just following along and just being a great cheerleader is enough. That's fantastic in and of itself. If you do donate, just keep in mind that I'll put up $1 of my own money for every single dollar that is donated to the GoFundMe, on top of the initial 25,000 that I put in to kind of get the ball rolling. What other ways can you support this? Just once we get the page up on my website and then the GoFundMe thing, if you guys could share it with any of your friends that you think are understand kind of what's going on with the Fed, maybe share it on your Facebook groups, share it on Twitter. Anything you can do like that would be fantastic. And the page on my website that we're setting up has like a 5-minute video where Robert and I discuss kind of the technical legal stuff as to how he's going to execute this game plan. And then I plan on putting up like a 5 or 10-minute whiteboard video going over exactly what we just talked about, those 3 ways that I think the Fed is really screwing things up and why we need it to stop. And then there's about I don't know, maybe a 1,000-word or maybe 500-word blog post kind of outlining and writing a summary of kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So when that's up, if you guys want to, if you can, if you could share that, that would be a big help. Who really runs the Fed? Well, I mean, this is stage 1. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to, I mean, it's the private banks, but we're trying to get all that information. And it's not just who runs the Fed. I mean, it's all of the transactions they do with, my goodness gracious, not just banks, but hedge funds, other countries, other central banks. It's about just collecting as much of the data as we can to figure out what they have done. That let's give them the benefit of the doubt. We're going to obviously see what they've done that is abiding by the law, but then we're also going to see if there's things they've done, which we know they've done illegal things going back to March, but we'll see what other things they have done that would fall outside of the Federal Reserve Act that that may be actionable. Will it be recorded? Well, I want to be clear that this isn't like we're going to like court and there's like a jury and everything. Now that may be the end result. Who knows? But no, the first stage of what we're doing here is just trying to get information. So it's not like it's not like Perry Mason or something like that. It's just basically trying to file this, and it's pretty much Robert just going back and forth with probably other lawyers. And I'm not really sure exactly how it works. It's just, that's the stage 1. We're just trying to get information. That's it. And it's through FOIA. And if you guys want to, you guys probably know more about that than I do. I'm just kind of deferring everything to Robert's expertise. But I know other people and other groups have sued the Fed under FOIA, and they've actually been successful. So hopefully we'll at least be successful to that degree. Sue to get an audit. Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. This isn't. We've got to sue under the FOIA, and that's what we're kind of doing. We're trying to extract as much information as we can so we can audit the Fed. Yeah, that's kind of the first stage here. Got Judicial Watch on board. I'm not sure what that is. I suggest send Fed hats and T-shirts. Yeah, well, on that topic, I just had Sebastian looking into getting those, those end the Fed hats that I get, that I wear. It's not hats, it's just one. It's getting kind of dirty. I'm actually gonna, that's the reason I'm not wearing it right now, because I've got it in the laundry. But the hashtag end the Fed hat, and then that rebel capitalist shirt I have. I actually had Sebastian look into buying 500 of those for the Rebel Capitalist live event. So if you've got your ticket to Rebel Capitalist Live, that's the live investment conference I'm doing June 11 through the 13th in Miami, Florida. And if you haven't checked out that page to see our speakers, you definitely got to do that. That's just at rebelcapitalistlive.com. But I'll probably be giving out the Rebel Capitalist T-shirts, and maybe end the hashtag end the Fed hat to everyone that shows up. We'll see if we can pull that off logistically. Yeah, I mean, you're trying. Economic research understood is saying you're trying to sue an entity that can change the rules as it goes. I hope that you get the data, but be aware they will charge or change the game on you. And yeah, I get it. And I totally get it. But this is about sending a message. It's great. You try to win, obviously. I'm not in this to lose anything. That's, you got to have when I was an entrepreneur before I retired, I had a couple business partners that were just top shelf guys. And we would always say, you can't have a loser mentality. You got to have a winning mentality. And there's certain things that people would do. If you've got, we'd see it in other entrepreneurs all the time, or sometimes employees, where they make excuses for this or for that, or not succeeding. And we would always say, that's a loser mentality. Now you can say, oh, George, that's harsh. You shouldn't say that. Okay, fine. But that's life in the big city. It's the real world. And the world isn't going to coddle you, nor is life. And if you're looking to be coddled, then you're probably not going to be very successful. Might be unfair, but it is what it is. So my point is, yes, we're going into this in an effort to win, because we have a winning mentality. But at the same time, the main objective is to send a message, not only to the central planners, but to everyone, to the average Joe and Jane, to your friend and family member Fred, that we don't have to sit back and just take this as a foregone conclusion. We have the power to enact change. The future is up to us. The future is not a foregone conclusion. And that we don't have to be bystanders, we don't have to be bystanders and just sit back and watch as the central planners just do whatever they want to do willy-nilly. That we can stand up and fight. And obviously I'm saying that figuratively. I'm not suggesting that suggesting that we get violent, obviously. But we can stand up and fight for what we believe is right. And if we do it, then we can set an example where everyone else around us says, wow, if those guys had the balls to get up there and try to slay Goliath, then maybe I can do that. And then what happens is, by leading from the front of the pack and leading by example, now you don't just have a lawsuit on your hands, but you've built a movement. You see? And that's where there's a lot of power. And this is just the first step. Now, whether we win or lose in court, hopefully we win, but at the very least, we start a movement that can potentially change the path for our entire country and society. And at the end of the day, we're doing this for our kids. We're doing this for our grandkids. We're doing this for our families. We're doing this for the future generations. All right, guys, I think I've gotten the message across. Thanks for hanging out with me. We've got 500 people or so on the live stream. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys hitting that notification bell. I'm going to go ahead and do some laundry and get some dinner and enjoy the rest of my evening. And I'll keep you guys posted on the lawsuit. And we'll be coming out with a lot more information. I'll probably interview Robert on the Rebel Capitalist show about it. And stay tuned. I appreciate you guys being a part of the Rebel Capitalist community. All right, we'll go ahead and do some shout outs. We've got Tirpin, Rob James, James Bowman, Reed, All-Nighter Hider, Arthur Larson, Lloyd Braun, Bear R, Dan Morish, Jason Kincaid, Peter Frauen, Frodo Friedman, Kenner Hotboy, Becky B, RR, Just John, Dom, Sawyer, Keith Boone, Kevin Schmidt, Ken Long, Sebastian Brozek, Kevin, Josh in the house, Josh Lassard, my good buddy. This thing, I cannot get this thing to stop skipping. Sustainable Lumber Company, always see them in the house. Moody's in the house. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening. And I will see you on the next video. Just FYI. Oh, shoot, I've got to upload it. I forgot to upload it. The interview this evening on the George Gammon channel is with Nick Carter, the Bitcoin expert. You're definitely going to want to check that out. And then the whiteboard video we had planned today, it's super, super long. So that's going to be out tomorrow night. And that's on the SLR. Enjoy your evening, guys, and we'll see you soon.